If your best friend conned you out of millions of dollars, would they still be your best friend? Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are exploring Scotty's castle in California's Death Valley. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting, or maybe scandalous episode of This House. As we begin exploring the history of Scotty's castle, we will continue to see the house while we uncover why anyone would build a 32,000 square foot mega mansion in the middle of Death Valley. In 1872, Albert Johnson was born to a wealthy Ohio family. His father had made millions in the banking industry and had invested heavily in utility and railroad companies. The family was very religious, so much so that Albert never so much as tasted alcohol for the entirety of his life. When he graduated college, Albert borrowed $40,000 from his dad, the modern-day equivalent of about $1.5 million, to invest in a Missouri zinc mining operation. This investment ended up being incredibly lucrative. Albert decided to continue investing in mining, but this time he wanted to find gold. He boarded a train with his father, headed out west to California to scout for mines to invest in. While the father and son were traveling, another train collided with theirs, causing the train to catastrophically derail. While Albert survived, his father did not. With a broken back, doctors told Albert that he would never walk again, but after 3 years of pushing himself through painful therapy, he made a near full recovery. Now that he was feeling better and had inherited his father's vast fortune, he moved to Chicago to join forces with Edward Shedd, his father's former business partner. The two went into business together, purchasing the National Life Insurance Company. The company was so successful that Albert's yearly salary was paid out in the sum of $1 million, the modern-day equivalent of nearly $34 million per year. When his business success was reported, it caught the attention of one of the nation's most notorious conmen, Walter Scott. Walter Scott, also known as Scotty, had been arrested several times for selling everything from snake's oil to fake bonds and running dozens of money laundering and embezzlement schemes. If there was a way to commit fraud, Scotty had done it. Scotty sent one of his associates to meet with Johnson and Shedd to sell them on the idea of a fictitious gold mining operation in California's Death Valley. The two bought into the con, under the belief that they would receive generous returns on their investments. But as time went on, no checks ever came in the mail. They decided to travel out west to investigate the mines for themselves. As they arrived in Death Valley, Scotty greeted them and began a tour of the bogus mining operation, when suddenly, a group of armed bandits jumped out of hiding. These bandits had been hired by Scotty to scare off the investors from the property so that they would not discover the truth. Unfortunately for the bandits, one of the investors was packing and shot them. At this point, they all realized what had actually happened and withdrew their investments. Well, all of them except for Albert Johnson. For some reason, he continued to believe that there must be a giant mining operation. He could not wrap his head around the fact that he had been conned. He believed that no one would go through all of this effort if there was not a massive load of gold to protect. He continued giving money to Scotty for years, never receiving a return on his investment. After nearly a decade, he hired a private detective to inspect Scotty's property, who confirmed that there was no gold and no active mines. Albert refused to believe him and began making trips out to Death Valley by himself. Scotty must have been the most talented conman of all time, or maybe Albert was just the most gullible man of all time. Either way, as Albert began visiting seasonally, year after year, he continued with the belief that Scotty had a successful mining operation that he was refusing to show to him. But as the time went on, Scotty and Albert became best friends. Albert would look forward to spending his winters camping in a tent with Scotty and listening to his outrageous stories. By 1915, Albert had purchased some property in Death Valley and built a small cabin. Then, in 1922, after 20 years of believing the con, Albert's wife decided to accompany him on a trip out west. She was an affluent Chicago socialite who could not stomach the idea of roughing it in the wild and demanded that Albert build a proper vacation house for them. Albert purchased 1,500 acres and began constructing the 32,000 square foot Spanish villa-style home we have been seeing throughout the video. He positioned it over the springs of Grapevine Canyon so that a Pelton wheel could be turned by the water to generate electricity for the house. providing enough electricity to illuminate every light and provide heated water, while storing the excess electricity underground in nickel-iron batteries. Of the other mechanical features of the house, it had automatic blinds on some of the windows, as well as a 1,121 pipe organ, which could be heard bellowing throughout the canyon. Unfortunately, as was Albert's nature, he was too trusting of the people he had hired to survey his land. It turned out that the survey was not only mistaken, but was completely fabricated. His mansion had been built on government-owned land, while the actual land he had purchased sat miles away. Thankfully, he was able to work out a land lease deal with the government to allow him to continue using the mansion, but that would eventually make it difficult to sell. When Albert passed away in 1948, he willed the house to a religious organization under the strict condition that Scotty be allowed to live in it and use it for his own purposes for the rest of his life. Scotty, of course, did not stop being a con man. With unrestricted use of the house, he invited financiers to the property, where he pretended to be a successful businessman and convinced them to lend him large sums of money which he never intended on paying back. After just a few short years of doing this, he passed away peacefully in 1954 at the age of 81 years old and was buried next to his favorite dog on a hill overlooking Scotty's castle. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment down below and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode of This House. You can also grab one of our limited time puzzles from our merch shop. Ranging in difficulty, these historic house puzzles are an entertaining and stimulating way to pass the time. Grab yours today by following the link in the video description. I would also like to take a moment to say a very special thank you to our This House supporters whose names you can see on screen right now. If you would like to see your name on the screen and contribute in part to the production of these videos, join our membership program today. I'll see you next time on This House.